In this game, the future world champion Mikhail Botvinnik gives a masterclass in seizing and developing the initiative. He seizes the initiative right in the opening by sacrificing the exchange. The sacrifice lets him develop his pieces with tempo. As a result, all his pieces become extremely active, while his opponent falls behind in development and his uncastled king becomes a target of attack. Botvinnik's opponent, Tolush, starts with d4. Botvinnik plays the Grünfeld defense. g6, knight c3, d5. Bishop f4, bishop g7, e3, short castle, rook c1, and Botvinnik starts to realize the main idea of the Grünfeld defense, namely the attack of white's pawn center, c5. Attacking the center and opening the queen's diagonal to the queen side. Tolush captures on c5, and in order to increase the pressure on white's center, Botvinnik plays queen a5, pinning the knight and vacating the d8 square for the rook, after which black will create a very unpleasant x-ray on the d-file. Tolush captures on d5 and rook d8 followed. Now the d5 pawn is under attack, and the strongest move for white would have been the natural developing move bishop c4, which would also defend the pawn. But in our game, Tolush prepared a very interesting tactical idea, a novelty, which, however, as the game will show, was a mistake, a dubious decision. He plays, instead of bishop c4, queen d2, unpinning his knight. Botvinnik, of course, captures on d5, attacking the bishop. Of course, white cannot capture. In this case, black would exchange the queens, after which the white king would lose the right to castle. Black would immediately return the piece and capture on b2. Black is much better because black pieces are very active. The white king is stuck in the center and the pawns are isolated and weak. Tolush didn't play queen d2 in order to get this terrible position. Instead, he prepared a very interesting idea. Tolush was known as a brilliant tactician, as an attacking player. He plays bishop c7, attacking both the queen and the rook. Of course, black cannot capture with the knight. In this case, the knight would stand between the queen and the rook, and white would simply capture the rook. But black can capture with the queen. That's exactly what Botvinnik did. But now that the queen has left a5, Tolush captures on d5, avoiding the exchange of the queens. And now we can see his idea. He gets a great centralized knight with tempo, attacking the queen. And most probably Tolush expected the natural-looking queen d7, because the knight is also attacking e7. And after queen d7, the knight would be under attack, but white can defend it, and black cannot kick the knight out immediately. e6 would have been a terrible blunder because of simple knight c7, and the a8 rook would fall. Of course, black cannot capture the knight because of simple queen takes d8. But Botvinnik didn't move his queen. Instead, he decided to sacrifice the exchange. He exchanges the rook for the pride of white's position, for the knight, for the centralized knight. And after queen takes d5, we can see Botvinnik's idea behind the exchange sacrifice. He eliminated white's best pieces, namely the dark squared bishop, which was placed on f4, and the great centralized knight on d5. And the remaining white pieces aren't developed, the king side isn't developed at all, the white king is stuck in the center, and the only active piece white has, namely the queen, will turn into the target of attack of the black pieces. And by attacking the white queen, black pieces will be developed with tempo. Of course, currently the b2 pawn is under attack, and black could have captured it, but that's not how one fights for the initiative. In this case, white would have played rook c2, and black has to spend another tempo to save the bishop. Instead of capturing the pawn, Botvinnik does the different thing. He fights for the initiative. He has to develop his pieces as fast as possible. Bishop e6, attacking the queen, developing the bishop with a tempo. The queen must retreat, defending the b2 pawn, and now we can see that both black bishops are very strong. Now knight c6, opening the way for the rook. Next move, black will play rook d8, again developing his last piece with tempo, attacking the queen, and that would be very effective, because the white queen doesn't have any squares on this diagonal. c3, of course, is controlled by the bishop, and b4 and a5 are controlled by the knight. That means after rook d8, the white queen will have to leave this diagonal, after which the black queen will give a check from a5, and the white king will lose the right to castle and will stay in the center until the end of the game. For this reason, white cannot make the natural developing moves. For example, Botvinnik gives the following variations. If bishop d3, then still rook d8, pinning the bishop and threatening bishop f5, attacking the pinned bishop for the second time. White has to unpin the bishop, but in this case, knight e5, again attacking the bishop for the second time. And after rook d1, defending it, queen a5 check. And after king f1, the catastrophe on the light squares will take place. Black would have eliminated the defender of the light squares and play bishop c4, and that would be the end. Neither can white play bishop c4 instead of bishop d3. In this case, again, rook d8, the queen must retreat, and queen a5 check. And after the king moves, the rook invades the second rank with great effect and again with a tempo. The best move for white in the anticipation of rook d8 would have been rook c3, in order to meet rook d8 with rook d3. But of course, after rook c3, black could have returned the sacrificed material by capturing on c3. Probably Tolush didn't want that. He didn't want to return the exchange. In this case, after queen takes c3, bishop takes a2, the material balance would have been re-established and black would have only a slight advantage due to the better development. So that was the right move to make, rook c3. But Tolush instead plays rook d1, retaining the exchange, and the idea is to oppose the black rook on the d file, rook d8. And after the queen retreats, queen a5 check, rook d2 is possible. And it seems white is ready to finally start the development of the king side and maybe even castle. In case white manages to do it, he will solve all his problems. So black must play as energetically as possible. And that's exactly what Botvinnik does. Rook d5, attacking the weak pawn on c5. It turns out that all pawns on the queen side will fall one by one, because all of them are under the terrible attack of the great black pieces. So the knight comes to help to defend the queen side. Knight e2, rook c5, capturing the first pawn of the queen side with tempo, attacking the queen. Knight c3, now Botvinnik exchanges the minor pieces and captures the second pawn, and again with a tempo, attacking the queen. Queen b2, and now it's time to eliminate the last pawn of the queen side. Rook a3, attacking the pawn for the third time, and there is no defense. White cannot capture on b7, that would be a terrible mistake, because of simple rook takes a2, attacking the pinned rook for the second time, and there is no way to defend the rook. That's why Tolush plays queen b5, offering the exchange of the queens, which would have decreased black's tremendous pressure. But of course, Botvinnik avoids the exchange of the queens. Queen c3. Now queen b2 followed. Tolush again offers the exchange of the queens, and again Botvinnik avoids it. Queen c5. So now white cannot play queen b5 anymore. Neither can white capture on b7 for the same reason. Black would simply play queen c1 check. Now, in case white plays rook d1, simply queen c3 check, and after rook d2, again rook a2, and the pinned rook will fall. Or after queen c1, instead of rook d1, white can play king e2, but that's also terrible. The king moves towards the center. After bishop c4 check, king f3, queen takes d2, of course, would follow, bishop takes c4, knight e5 check with a fork, and after king g3, Botvinnik gives a beautiful rook sacrifice in his annotations. Rook takes e3 check. In case white captures, after queen takes e3, king h4, queen f4 check, followed by checkmate on g4. And in case white doesn't capture the rook and plays f3, which would be relatively better. Still, black would capture the bishop. In order to return the piece, white must check on c8 and capture the knight, but after rook e2, the black major pieces dominate the second rank. Both pawns are under attack. Besides that, the queen g5 check is possible. That's why Tolush didn't capture on b7, of course, and as the pawn on a2 is under attack, black is simply threatening to capture it, attacking the queen, Tolush plays queen b1, opening the rook's way, and now the pawn is attacked twice, and it's also defended twice. So now you can pause the video and try to find Botvinnik's tactical shot. So he captures on a2, and after rook takes a2, queen a5, check, and attacking the rook for the second time. In case the white king moves, black would simply capture the rook. That's why Tolush plays rook d2, but now rook a1, pinning the queen, and the queen is lost. But for the queen, white has two rooks. After bishop d3 and the exchange on b1, as you see, white has two rooks. But the problem is that one of these rooks is pinned and the second one isn't developed. Besides that, black has two connected passed pawns on the queen side. Botvinnik plays knight e5. We will see the idea of this move very soon. The only way to unpin the rook and to bring into play the second rook is queen e2, of course. But now queen b5 check. As the knight controls these squares, the only move is bishop d3, and the minor pieces are exchanged, and again the rook is pinned. So Botvinnik starts moving his pawns, a5. The only way to unpin the rook is to defend it first in order to move the king. Queen c4. The only pawn march isn't so effective. The pawns must move side by side, supporting each other. That's why queen c4, opening the way for the b pawn. King f3, finally unpinning the rook, and b5, of course. Rook d7 followed, not to capture the pawn, of course. Black pawns are very dangerous, and white will try to stop the pawns. b4, rook a7. But the pawn is under attack, but Botvinnik simply moves it forward. a4. There is a simple tactics. White cannot capture because of rook c6, check, and the rook falls. That's why after a4, Tolush plays rook d8 check and rook a8, attacking the pawn, but the pawn moves forward. g3, and the final move, queen b5, placing the queen behind the b pawn, and there is nothing white can do to prevent the advance of the b pawn. That's why Tolush resigned. And now I recommend watching one of the most famous games of Botvinnik, in which he sacrificed both of his rooks in the opening. But first, like this video and subscribe, as it's really helpful for the channel growth.